Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The way she said it, soft, tired, like someone half talking to herself, carried more weight than anything I'd ever heard in that small cafe. The rain had just started outside, tapping against the glass. She was sitting across from me, one hand curled around a cup she hadn't touched in minutes. Her name was Elena. She'd been my professor 2 years ago, literature, the kind that made you feel things you weren't ready for. Tonight, she wasn't a teacher. She was just a woman sitting under dim light, her coat draped over the chair, hair loose around her face, eyes fixed on something far away. I shouldn't have been there with her. That thought had crossed my mind at least a dozen times before she even spoke. But when she texted, "Are you still around the city?" I said yes before thinking. I'd been waiting for her to say anything at all. Now, sitting across from her, I couldn't think of a single thing to say back. The silence between us stretched thin, fragile. I could hear the faint hum of the espresso machine, a couple whispering near the window, the scrape of her spoon against porcelain. She didn't look up right away, just kept tracing the rim of her cup with her finger, like she was writing something invisible. When she finally met my eyes, it felt like she'd caught me doing something I shouldn't. "You ever feel," she said slowly, "like people stop noticing you once they've decided who you are?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure I really understood. What I did understand was that she wasn't asking me for an answer, she just needed someone to listen. Her lips curved slightly, but it wasn't a smile. "You were always good at listening." I wanted to say something, anything, to bridge the space between us. Instead, I just watched the way she reached for her cup again, how her sleeve slipped back, revealing the small silver bracelet she always wore in class. The one I'd noticed back then, too. Her hand brushed mine as she set the cup down. It was barely a touch, but my breath caught anyway. She didn't pull away. "You've grown," she said after a moment, her tone shifting, half proud, half surprised. "Still figuring things out," I managed to say. "Aren't we all?" The way she said it, quiet, weary, made something inside me ache. It wasn't the kind of sadness you can fix with words. It was the kind that made you want to stay, just so the other person didn't feel it alone. The rain outside grew heavier, streaking the glass, blurring the street lights into gold smudges. The whole world felt small, just this table, her perfume faint in the air, and the space between our hands. I found myself staring too long, until she noticed. Her gaze held mine unflinching. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't what?" Her voice dropped, almost a breath. "Look at me like that." I wanted to look away. I couldn't. Something unspoken passed between us, a pull that had been waiting silent since the last time I'd seen her. She sighed and leaned back, breaking the spell. "You should probably go before." But she didn't finish. The door to the cafe swung open behind me, letting in a gust of cold air and a voice that called her name. She turned. I didn't. All I knew was that whatever came next, nothing between us would feel casual again. The man who'd called her name turned out to be a colleague, someone from the university. They spoke briefly, polite smiles, no warmth. I watched her body language shift, shoulders straight, voice careful. The mask of the professor again. When he finally left, she exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. "Sorry," she said softly. "Old habit. Pretending I'm fine." I shook my head. "You don't have to pretend with me." That earned me a look, long, unreadable. For a second, I thought she might smile, but instead she reached for her coat. "You should walk me out," she said, her tone light but her hand trembling slightly as she gathered her things. Outside, the rain had thinned to a mist. Streetlights glowed against the wet pavement, reflecting faint halos around her as we walked. She didn't say much, and I didn't press her. But there was something heavy in the air, the kind of silence that says more than words could. When we reached her car, she hesitated before unlocking it. "You're still in school?" "Graduated last spring," I said. "Trying to figure out what's next." "Ah." Her expression softened. "You always struck me as someone who thought too much for his own good." I smiled. You used to say that in class? She leaned against the car door, eyes flicking to mine. And you never listened. There it was again, that undercurrent neither of us wanted to name. For a moment, we just stood there, the sound of the rain mixing with the hum of the street. I could see the small scar near her collarbone, the way her hair clung slightly damp to her neck. She wasn't trying to be alluring. She just was. Do you miss teaching? I asked quietly. She took a moment before answering. Sometimes. Mostly I miss connection. You give so much of yourself to other people's stories, you start forgetting your own. Her honesty caught me off guard. I didn't know what to do with it, the rawness, the loneliness wrapped in calm. Before I could speak, she laughed softly, almost embarrassed. Listen to me, talking like an old woman. You don't sound old, I said. You sound. She raised an eyebrow. Careful. I swallowed the rest of the sentence. But she knew. The way her eyes lingered told me she knew exactly what I hadn't said. Her fingers brushed a raindrop from my cheek. Just a quick motion, but her hand stayed there a heartbeat too long. My pulse stumbled. Elena. She let out a shaky breath and stepped back, keys twisting in her hand. Go home, she whispered, though her voice wasn't steady. Before I forget, I'm supposed to be the sensible one. I didn't move. Neither did she. The space between us felt charged, fragile, like something waiting to happen if either of us breathed too deeply. Then she looked up, rain glinting on her lashes. Good night, she said, barely audible. She got into her car and closed the door, but for a moment, just before the engine started, her hand pressed against the glass, palm open, facing me. I didn't touch it. But I wanted to. And for the first time, I wasn't sure who was more afraid, her or me. It had been weeks since that night outside the cafe. Weeks of silence that felt deliberate, the kind that hums underneath your skin. Then, one afternoon, I saw her again. The university was holding an alumni event, and I hadn't planned on going. But a mutual friend insisted. Come on, he'd said. Elena's organizing it. She'll want to see you. He said her name casually, unaware of the weight it carried. When I arrived, the hall was already crowded, familiar faces, polite laughter, the clink of glasses. And there she was, standing near the stage, talking to a group of faculty. Same calm posture, same controlled smile. Only her eyes betrayed a flicker of something when she saw me. For a second, either of us moved. Then she nodded, a small, almost imperceptible gesture. I waited until the crowd thinned before approaching. You clean up well, she said, tone easy, though her fingers tightened around her glass. So do you, I replied. Her laugh was quiet. Don't say things like that here. I didn't. But the words still hung between us, unspoken and heavy. Someone from her department came over, a tall man, overly familiar. He placed a hand on her shoulder, and something inside me tightened. She smiled politely, but her eyes flicked to mine, just once, like she felt it too, that invisible pull we kept pretending wasn't there. The man left after a few minutes. She exhaled softly. You shouldn't look at me like that. Like what? Like you remember? Before I could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned slightly, and slipped it back into her bag without answering. The air between us thickened. Walk with me, she said suddenly. We slipped out a side door, into the quiet courtyard behind the hall. The night air was cool, smelling faintly of jasmine and rain. She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. I offered my jacket. She hesitated, then took it. Our fingers brushed, a quick, electric touch that neither of us acknowledged. You shouldn't be here, she said softly. Then why ask me to come? Her breath hitched, a tiny sound. Because I wanted to see if it was still there. What? This, she whispered. The word hung in the dark like a confession. I took a step closer. She didn't move away. There was a pause, a heartbeat, maybe two, before she finally looked up. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, she didn't hide. The distance between us disappeared until I could feel the warmth of her breath against my mouth. "Elena, don't," she said again, but it sounded nothing like a warning. The sound of footsteps echoed suddenly from the corridor behind us. She flinched and stepped back just as a group of staff appeared, laughing, oblivious. By the time they passed, the moment was gone, or at least, it should have been. But then she looked at me again, eyes soft and unguarded. "You should go," she whispered, though her hand lingered against my arm. I nodded, but neither of us moved. The silence stretched sharp, magnetic, impossible. We didn't kiss. But if someone had seen us right then, they would have known. Whatever line we were trying to stay behind had already been crossed. It started with a message she shouldn't have sent. "Can you drop by? I found something that belongs to you." No greeting, no signature, just that. But I knew her rhythm, her restraint. I knew she wouldn't ask unless she wanted me to come. Her apartment was on the 4th floor, warm light through half-closed curtains, quiet music spilling from inside. I stood there for a full minute before knocking. When she opened the door, she looked different. Softer. Barefoot, hair loose, sleeves rolled up like she'd been cleaning but got distracted halfway through. "Come in," she said, her voice lower than usual. "There's something that supposedly belonged to me turned out to be an old notebook I'd left in her class years ago. My handwriting, messy and uncertain." She held it between her fingers as if it were fragile. "I thought you'd want it back," she said. "I didn't even know I'd lost it. Maybe not. But I kept it anyway." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was charged. I watched her thumb skim the edge of the cover, the faint tremor in her hand. "Why did you keep it?" I asked quietly. She looked up. "Because it reminded me of someone who used to look at me like I mattered." Her honesty cut through me. The air between us thickened. "Elena, don't," she whispered, but her hand was already brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear, the smallest movement, yet everything in me noticed. She stepped closer. I could smell the faint trace of tea and something floral on her skin. Her voice softened. "You think this is easy for me? I never said it was. You're young. You'll move on. She stopped, eyes flicking away. "I don't get to be reckless anymore." "Then don't call it reckless," I said. "Call it real." Something flickered in her eyes, anger, maybe longing, maybe both. "You don't understand," she said, her voice breaking. "People talk. They always do. And I've already been through enough of that." I took a slow step toward her. "Then let them talk." She didn't move back. My hand found her arm, light, uncertain. She didn't pull away. Instead, her breath caught, shallow, uneven. "You have no idea what you're doing," she whispered. "I do," I said, my voice barely there. "I'm looking at you." For a moment, everything stopped. Her gaze softened, resignation and want mixing until I couldn't tell them apart. Her hand came up, resting against my chest. I could feel her heartbeat through her palm, fast and uneven. "This isn't supposed to happen," she said, trembling. "But it is," I whispered back. She tilted her head up slightly, close enough that I could feel her breath against my lips, warm, unsteady. We stayed there, suspended between yes and no, the air charged with everything we hadn't said. Then came the sound, the sharp buzz of her phone on the counter. It broke the spell like glass shattering. She stepped back, hand falling away. The look in her eyes said everything: want, fear, regret. I didn't move. Neither did she. Her voice was barely audible when she finally spoke. "If I let you stay, I won't stop myself." And then silence. The kind that means everything's about to change. The next time I saw her, she wasn't expecting me. It was late, the campus quiet, the hallways humming faintly under the flicker of security lights. I'd gone there to drop off a form, something routine. But when I passed her office, I saw the light still on. She was sitting at her desk, phone pressed to her ear, voice low, trembling in a way I'd never heard before. "I told you to stop calling," she said sharply, though it cracked halfway through. It's over. No, I don't care who you tell. Do what you want. She hung up hard. Then just sat there, motionless, one hand over her face. I didn't mean to speak, but the words slipped out. Elena? She startled, eyes flashing toward the door, then softening when she saw me. You shouldn't be here. I was just, please, she said, standing too quickly. Not tonight. Her voice was uneven, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked frightened. Not of me, of something else. I hesitated, then stepped inside anyway. Who was that? She didn't answer right away. She turned away, rubbing her temples. Someone who used to know me. Someone who thinks he still does. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she was holding herself together by sheer force. An ex? I asked carefully. She laughed, hollow, bitter. Something like that. I thought I could keep parts of my life separate. I was wrong. There was something raw in her tone, something that didn't belong to the calm woman I'd known. Elena, I said softly. What happened? She finally faced me. He was a colleague. It ended a long time ago, but he doesn't seem to understand what ending means. I stepped closer, instinctively, not to pry, but to be near her. She shook her head. If he finds out about you. Her words trailed off, and that silence said everything. About us. I finished quietly. There isn't an us, she said too quickly. Then softer. Not like this. But her voice betrayed her. The space between us dissolved again, not with words, but the way her body leaned slightly toward mine, her hands trembling as she tried to gather the papers on her desk. Let me help, I said. She didn't move when I reached for them. Our fingers brushed, the briefest contact, and she froze. You make it so hard to think, she whispered. Then don't think, I said, my voice low, almost against her ear. She turned toward me, close enough that our breaths mingled. Her lips parted, not quite a word, more like a surrender she didn't want to admit. And then she said it. If anyone finds out, I'll lose everything. It wasn't a warning. It was a truth. A desperate, human truth that made every heartbeat between us louder. Then let's be careful, I said. Her eyes met mine, conflicted, searching. Then she stepped past me, brushing against my shoulder as she reached for the door. The movement was sharp, decisive, but her hand lingered on the knob, trembling. Go, she whispered. Before I decide not to let you. I didn't move. She turned slightly, enough for the hallway light to catch the tears she hadn't meant to shed. For a second, everything she'd been hiding was visible: fear, longing, the weight of being seen again. And even as she closed the door between us, I knew neither of us would stop. Whatever line we thought we could hold, it was already gone. It rained again the night everything came to a head, the same kind of rain that had started it all. Soft, steady, patient. She hadn't answered my messages for days. Not after the night in her office, not after she told me to go. I told myself to move on, that it was better this way. But that was a lie, the kind of lie you tell just to breathe. When her text finally came, it was only 2 words. Come over. No punctuation. No hesitation. Her apartment light was dim when I arrived, shadows cast long across the walls. She was standing by the window, arms folded, looking out at the street. You came, she said, not turning. You asked me to. She nodded once, slow. Maybe I shouldn't have. Then tell me to leave, I said quietly. She didn't. Instead, she turned, and the moment she did, I knew the decision had already been made. Her eyes looked different, not uncertain this time, just tired of pretending. You shouldn't be here, she said again, but her voice had no force. I know. The room was too quiet. The rain filled the silence like a rhythm neither of us could ignore. I tried, she said, stepping closer. I really tried to keep this safe. Safe doesn't mean right, I said. She let out a small, trembling laugh. You sound like me now. I learned from the best. Her breath caught. She was so close now I could feel the heat radiating from her, the faint scent of her perfume, the way her fingers flexed at her side like she was fighting herself. "This isn't fair to you," she whispered. "Then let it be unfair." She closed her eyes, shaking her head. "You think this is something simple? You'll wake up one day and wonder what I ever gave you but guilt." I stepped forward until there was barely space between us. "You gave me the truth." Her eyes opened then, sharp, wet, unguarded. "And what if the truth ruins us? Then at least it's ours," I said. Her breast shuddered, her lips parting like she wanted to argue but couldn't. The tension in the air was unbearable, a fragile gravity pulling us closer, holding us there. When she finally moved, it wasn't a choice, it was surrender. Her hand came up, tracing my jaw, hesitant, trembling. I caught her wrist lightly, not to stop her, just to hold it still. "I see you," I said. That broke her. The wall she'd held for months collapsed with one exhale. She leaned into me, forehead against mine, her breath mingling with mine, every inch of her trembling but sure. "Say it again," she whispered. "I see you." And she did the smallest thing, she smiled, even as her eyes glistened. Then she pulled me closer, closing the distance that had been haunting us since the beginning. It wasn't a kiss, not yet, just that final moment before one happens, where everything is suspended and nothing else exists. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. "Then don't look away." And I didn't. Whatever happened next, whatever the world would say, it didn't matter. For the first time, we weren't hiding. We were exactly where we'd been heading all along. Scene. The days after that night felt unreal, like we were moving through a dream neither of us wanted to wake from. We didn't rush. There were no grand declarations, no reckless decisions. Just small moments, the ones that built everything. I'd show up at her office with coffee, and she'd accept it without a word, letting her hand brush mine as she took the cup. Sometimes we'd linger by the window, rain streaking the glass, and I'd feel her shoulder press against mine, a silent reassurance either of us dared voice. We talked more, too. About books, old memories, fears we never shared with anyone else. And in those conversations, the age gap felt irrelevant. 20 years between us didn't matter in the quiet of shared laughter or when she rested her head on my shoulder, trusting me without needing to explain. One evening, after a long day, she invited me up to her apartment. I hesitated, only briefly, because hesitation had lost its power over me. She was waiting by the door, casual but radiant, hair falling in soft waves. When she smiled at me, everything else fell away. "Come in," she said. Inside, the apartment smelled faintly of vanilla and wet rain. She gestured to the couch, and we sat close, not brushing, just close enough that our knees touched. For a while, we said nothing. We didn't need to. I could feel her breathing against my arm, her warmth seeping into me. Slowly, naturally, our fingers intertwined. I tightened my grip just enough, and she leaned into me, resting her head against my shoulder. "I was afraid," she murmured. "Afraid I'd lose myself in this, or scare you away." "You could never scare me away," I whispered, brushing her hair back from her face. "I've seen you. All of you." Her eyes glistened. She smiled softly, forehead pressing against mine, and I felt everything, the longing, the fear, the months of restraint, all melting into that single, quiet moment. We stayed like that for hours. Talking, breathing, holding each other. No urgency. No world outside mattered. Finally, she tilted her head up, lips just brushing mine in a tentative, perfect kiss. Not hurried, not desperate, just exactly what it needed to be. My hands cupped her face, and she melted into the warmth, sighing softly. When we pulled back, she rested her forehead against mine again. "I never thought I'd feel this scene again," she said. "You're always seen," I replied. And in the quiet of her apartment, with rain still tapping the windows, that was enough. We didn't need explanations. We didn't need permission. Just the simple, human truth. We belonged to each other in the moments that mattered most. Hand in hand, heart in heart, we finally let ourselves stay.